say, did you want to give some opening thoughts, or do you want to go ahead and ask? We can ask Darren, who Darren is on phone duty today, so he's going to be muting that to do the presentation as well. So I don't know if you wanted to do any opening remarks before Darren starts, or
No, I would say go ahead and let Darren start. I'm gonna work through my Wi-Fi issues, and that way, since he's in between phone calls, maybe that'll serve us both well.
great, great. Go ahead, Darren.
Okay, hello everyone. Let me just get this window ready. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and share out just some highlights from the survey that folks filled out. John Paul, if you could you give me co-host or host capabilities, and then I'll jump right into some of these highlights. Okay. Share screen. Okay, can you all see this?
Yes.
Great. And if you noticed, I shared out Caitlin's notes from the sessions themselves. I know you all covered that in November, but I was just sharing that with you as again, maybe as a refresher to supplement analysis from this. And so what you're looking at right now is, well, I shouldn't be showing the names, but this is the first session pie chart for, I'm sorry, this is the first and second session. The blue is about 65% or 9 people responded to the survey. And then about 5 people for the December 4th session. I did want to go over a few items with everyone. So for the November session, only 2 respondents shared that they or provided responses for this. Oh, shoot. I'm letting Ebony Rose back in. So 2 respondents shared some feedback from the first session. Out of some went to social studies, some went to accountability for that first session. And so 2 respondents said for that first who provided feedback said that gave a 3 out of 4 and a 4 out of 4, so they were satisfied. And overall, everyone from both November and December were satisfied with the with both sessions, so nothing below a 3 out of 4. And from the first session, out of the 2 respondents, only 1 gave feedback on what they wanted to ask more about, which was COVID and reopening. And so they just wanted to know a bit more about that. What did you like most about the engagement? So I had to actually download a file and just break it down into governance only. And so they just provided, there wasn't a lot in that area, but it was mostly just feedback on were there any other topics that you'd like to give feedback on? And that's sort of what I want to delve into with this, was the feedback from that. And so I just wanted to share out from the topics that you would like to get more feedback on. The topics were tech equity, social emotional wellness, graduation requirements, mayoral control. And then the others were just saying that Ebony and Rose did a great job facilitating. And then another question, do you have any other comments, questions, or suggestions for the state board at this time? For the education governance specifically, They said that they were very interested. I think this is that there was one that really stood out, which was get intentional wording and notifications were explicitly given. They want the language so they can go to the mayor and be able to advocate for schools, or the wording that you are using. What can stakeholders use to email or talk to the mayor with? So that was one that really stood out. Another was that they noticed how they were interested in how students can contribute and participate in and be involved in this process. So this is another question or suggestion for the state board. And that was about it. Again, there were about 7 respondents for the second session. And only 2 for the first session that provided feedback. So not a lot of feedback out of everyone who showed up. This is just based on who responded to the survey.
Darren, do we know the, excuse me, do we know the breakdown of numbers at each session for the governance presentation?
I'm actually going to share a different screen with you because I feel like this isn't very helpful. This this survey does not, or this website doesn't really break it down by education governance specifically. So let me share a different screen with you. So I had to specifically download the this file. What it does is it G provides the first breakout session. And this is for both November. If everything in orange is the November fall engagement, everything in blue are respondents to the December engagement. And so I put together just a quick high level, just high level notes from this. So what I just did was filtered for the November fall engagement first session. That's what you're looking at right now.
But do we know how many people actually attended? It was pretty well attended, if I remember correctly.
Yes, the full number, I'm still trying to get an exact number for who attended. This is just for out of the first session for November. This is who responded, but I do have the total number. What I could do is send an email out once I get a handle on that number.
It's not a big deal. I mean, it's not, not going to impact this, obviously, this feedback. So, but just was curious.
And then let me just stop sharing because I just want to make sure that I don't have anyone's name come up on the screen. Do you mind if I stop sharing just really quickly? I'll cover that up and then return back to that. Let's see here. Okay. I apologize. Right. So again, this is for the first session. Folks said they what they liked most about the engagement was opportunities for conversations and learning important information, meeting board members, hearing about their work, hearing perspectives from others in the community. What did you like least about the engagements? For the November 1st session, It is assumed a level of knowledge that some participants don't have. And then this other person said nothing for what they like least about it. Again, as I mentioned, were there any other topics you would have liked to have given the state board feedback on? The only area was COVID school reopening, and then nothing for any other further questions. Before I move to this for the second session breakdown, am I going too fast? Does this make sense to you all? Or is this, do you have any questions before I move on?
No, it makes sense. It's pretty straightforward, I think.
And then this is the second session. Yes, the second session. And as you can see, there were 7 respondents. 4 of them were from the November date, and 3 of them were from the December fall engagement. And so just a few high-level items from this. What did you like most about this session? So from November, again, interaction with stakeholders. It was a good experience. The opportunity to provide written feedback in addition to oral feedback. Most board members were present. They appreciated the social distancing provided, paper copies of the presentation, and really appreciated food was available. And I believe this was feedback we've also heard from other sessions as well. I know working on accountability, this is something that is across, I think, accountability as well, is the social distance, the safety aspect of in-person engagements like this, and having food availability. For what did you like least about this? I felt that each station could have been its own full evening. So a lot of information, I think, in a short amount of time. Again, this is something similar to accountability. Oh, wait a minute. Why is that there? That's strange. Oh, I see. Well, I don't know why this is coming up, but these are for the people who did the second session. So in most sessions, the facilitators talk for most of the available time. So I think, I don't know why.
Darren, it looks like just the way the comments are organized. So those look like not this that you're clicked on now, but those look like feedback for other sessions.
I just realized that it wasn't taking out the first breakout sessions.
Don't, yeah.
But the highlights that I put down earlier today were specific to state board feedback. So I'm not sure why this is still popping up. The highlights I mentioned earlier deal with the governance, the governance sessions. So again, they want to know more about mayoral control. And I think, again, the major highlight is having the language to speak or to advocate for schools. I'd have to go back and see why this is still popping up, but definitely earlier I was able to just check the second session for education governance. So that's about it in terms of just reviewing the feedback. Again, I could share out this file following this meeting, as well as just some quick highlights from that, if that's helpful.
That'd be helpful. I don't think I have this file. Caitlin sent her notes, which are super helpful.
And I'll also, in the same email, I'll share out the full number that attended both sessions.
I did look at the survey back when we when it was first sent out. And now I'm just wondering if our questions were, if the questions we had on the survey really elicited feedback that was pertinent to the topics. Because a lot of this feedback, it's useful in terms of having another input session for sure. And that's useful in terms of like providing some insights for specific committees on their topics. There's only a couple of things that you mentioned, Darren, that would fit that, I think. And this is not a criticism of you at all. I'm thinking more of like future surveys, how we may want to change those, like add some questions that are really specific to, getting constituent input on the actual issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know there's a way using SurveyMonkey, so the survey that we used was from Google Forms. SurveyMonkey allows for more of a conversation, like a much, not to say Google Forms can't be used on mobile phones, but the other platform we use, SurveyMonkey, similar to member feedback, there could be sort of a chat kind of discussion with respondents. We have options, I guess. So
yeah, I'm not sure if that's the issue. It might be. I mean, that might help, but I guess what I'm thinking, I was in the first, the November governance session, one of them, and I know like the main focus was on what's your experience and sort of getting a sense of how participants experience our governance system. And I don't really get a sense of, I would hope that our survey then would build on that, and help us sort of understand more than we got from the session itself. And I don't get that sense. So I think it's a matter of the kinds of questions we're asking. Yeah. So like, again, just for future, there are other platforms that may help us get more authentic or whatever. I don't know, but I'm not sure that's the issue here.
But
sorry, Darren. I was going to say that it might be helpful. So maybe it's helpful to walk through some of the notes from the session. So Darren told me I should do that. So one thing I did not want to take for granted is that we all sit on multiple committees. And I know Emily had the benefit of sitting through the actual feedback from the session, but not everybody did. So I'll walk through Caitlin's notes with the group because they are particularly helpful. And she did an amazing job of just capturing not only the conversation in the space, but she did a good job of capturing literally like the visuals we put together from the exercise. So I think that's particularly helpful in seeing kind of how people are experiencing. Hey, John Paul.
Hi, I'm having audio and video and camera issues, but can you guys hear me now? Great.
Yes.
Okay. So I think I think Emily is hitting this spot on, and I think one of the challenges and this is one of the learning opportunities that we've had in having these engagement sessions and learning on how to do engagement through through the years that I've been at the board, is understanding what we need to have prepared ahead of the engagement sessions, right? Like we need to know pretty far in advance, really, what's going to be presented on, so that we can have the survey ready to go once people leave that space and have the questions tailored the same way that the presentation is. And I think that's just a matter of planning and walking things back and understanding what we need to do ahead of time. And I think Emily, that's what you're sort of saying is yes, we need to be much more tailored in our questions for the exit survey because, so that we can actually get the rich information that we want from that as well. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm 900% behind you on that one. And Ebony Rose, I'm going to make you co-host so you can then share screen.
It might actually be helpful too, with that thought, if like I got the email about filling out the survey, but of course I didn't fill it out because I'm a state board member. And I'm just going to be human and admit that when I get surveys via email after something, I may or may not fill it out. So maybe it might, if we could be prepared enough, because I heard Emily asking how many people were in the session versus how much feedback did we get. Maybe if we could have it ready to go, like as an exit ticket or something, might be beneficial to us too, because I'm sure some people just skipped it. All right, so I'm going to share Caitlin's amazing notes. And I will send the file because I realized that she sent them to me and didn't send them to everyone. I feel pretty comfortable sharing them, knowing this meeting is recorded, because Caitlin also did an excellent job. We laid out from the beginning that we would not capture people's names in the feedback. So that's not a concern. And I want to do my best to share as much as possible what we learned, because we got some really good responses. So this is a little context. You all will remember that we had a conversation as a board about what type of feedback we want to capture. And our goal was largely to capture how are people experiencing the system currently and where they see opportunity for improvement. So largely the questions are based on that. A couple of things that are interesting. So like we started with asking about people's perception, what words come to mind with governance and decision-making, top down, thoughts about like collaboration and communication. We had a bunch of conversation around what a system would look like that is student-centered, family-driven, what autonomy looks like, and what an equitable system would look like. My colleagues are talking to me per usual. So that was pretty interesting. Thoughts and feelings that come to mind. I'll let you take a look, but some of the things that stood out to me were things around like confusion. It happens to people and assumes you're ignorant, like top down appeared a couple different ways, and like complicated or complex showed up in a bunch of different ways. And again, I'll send this file to everyone.
Ebony Rose, I'm sorry. So wait, the first one is just general, right? Like when you think of governance in general?
So,
okay, yes. Okay, now I see.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay.
The questions are laid out at the top.
Yeah, I
So
just missed the first.
Here are the responses. And this is, so this category of things, this section is for the first session. So that's going to be the November session. And it's going to be the December session. So they're not separated out. I mean, they are separated out, but they are kind of back to back.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thank you.
Oh, and Darren did forward to everybody prior to the meeting. So that's amazing. Thoughts and feelings. And I would say they were largely kind of in the same kind of category of feeling for both sessions. This one kind of inequitable showed up. I'm not so sure I saw inequitable in the last one. Autocratic, again, confusion appears. These are particularly interesting. So just a little bit of background on what we had people do. And I will say this first one is the November 15th one. And then the second one is in the two sessions. So November 15, session 1, November 15, session 2, December, session 1, December, session 2. So you know what we're looking at. We asked people to write down all of the stakeholders that they know of when it comes to governance on Post-its. And then we asked them to place them, and this was the activity we talked about as a committee, that we asked them to place them on how they experience them with regards to responsiveness and their ability to do something. And then we talk through. So when I scroll down so you can see, or when you look at on your own time, the notes around the why, we talk through why people put these in different quadrants. In the interest of time, we tried to pick out where we saw groupings. So like in this particular session, we saw a grouping of OSSI in one place. We saw a grouping of PCSB here, DME here, and like people being able to talk through the commonalities and the differences with that. So this is the first chart. Now I'll pause a bit to see if anybody has any reactions to this initial chart.
I'm just surprised there's not more DCPS on here. You kind of just, I don't see it. I mean, I think there's a few, right? But it's really OSSI. People are naming.
And I will say the frequency of different agencies shows up in different charts. I will say, and I will say that this first group, so fall engagement session 1, group 1 was probably one of our smaller groups. Which is why you see less post-its on this chart.
What does the writing say on the little blue one and the pink one there?
Families.
Oh, okay.
And
Charter.
many LEAs with their own governance structure.
Huh.
I will say I did my best. Ward-based ed councils, of which Ward 7 is the best. I did not write that, but I will acknowledge that this first engagement session was in Ward 7. So it could be biased. That doesn't mean it's not true.
Biased and true. Okay, got it.
Some things are.
Possible.
Funny how that works.
Facts are facts, huh, Ebony? That's just what it is, huh?
How we arrive at those decisions, hey, but sometimes facts are facts. So like you see, this one has a lot more post-its because this was a larger group. And again, like there are some similarities, but there are also some differences. So like you tend to see different advocacy groups on this chart, like AJE, Advocates for Justice and Education. We get specific about which SBOE reps, right? We get OSSI. So if you notice on this first chart, OSSI was also in this quadrant, but it's in different placements. So it's really interesting to hear Ward 1 Ed Council showed up here. It's really interesting when we look at the feedback, when people talk through how they placed and why they placed, was really a learning experience.
Where is Ward 1? Just curious.
Here.
Oh, okay.
So
That little pink one sticking out right there.
Yeah, I couldn't see it.
Ward 1 is here. Yeah, so some of the little ones you probably can't see. We got really specific. National Center for Montessori in the Public Sector. We got, this one's probably smaller, on the board education committees. And Caitlin did a really good job of showing like when there were multiple post-its. So I encourage people, if they agree, like if that was the place you were gonna put it, still put it in your place and there might be an overlap. So like these two would both say Office of the Ombudsman because these people largely agreed with the placement of that or their experience. A couple others that these people were really this group got really in the weeds on OSSI. So we got to a point of like specific people in OSSI. Most people probably would not have that level of expertise. But one of the good things about the sessions was people did have varying levels of expertise. I will say in the first session, in this session, I know, and then I think this session, we had 2 people who were new to DC altogether, and they still were able to participate and give feedback as far as their perceptions and participate in the conversation, in addition to people who clearly had a lot of information about how at least certain segments of our governance worked. And so from that perspective, if I editorialize a little bit, I would say our goal was met in having an interaction that was able to engage at varying levels of experience and understanding.
But again, it's interesting. DCPS is not on here. I mean, I guess our folks just
here, but I think the difference with DCPS is DCPS shows up, there's no cluster for DCPS. So like You'll notice like there's DCPS here, there's
Okay.
DCPS central office, there's DCPS school leaders. I think people are my takeaway, and I think it'll probably be good when we kind of get into the notes a little bit, is that people experience DCPS in pieces,
Mhm.
and kind of speak to those experiences about how, as opposed to largely something like OSSI or the mayor of the DME, where they're able to boil it down into one entity in a real
Right.
weird way.
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint what you
But
would
that was
name.
interesting for me. And then you see different ones show up here. So like DGS showed up here, right? And we know they absolutely affect schools. We have, what else is new on this one? Some people are still calling us the Board of Education
Wait, why are there 4 Ebony Rose?
because it's 2 sessions
Oh, right. Okay,
per two sessions per engagement session.
got it. Oh, that's super interesting. Okay, so in the one session, you had 2 groups that were really different. Got it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So really interesting feedback. I'm trying to see if there's any other. So like the mayor largely still, people largely place the mayor peer still similar. You see OSSI kind of start to shift in this one.
And DME has no power. That's fascinating.
SBOE largely in the same quadrants. So you start to see trends, which is really interesting. DC Council, I think in this one, we also got some feedback about some people put questions up, so don't know who the decision makers are. How do we find out? And then also council. This group was particularly interested in council, started listing like individual council members and, place them on different post-its. So it really depends on how people are interacting and where they know to interact. And then this was the final one. One that I saw on here that didn't show up other places, ANCs show up on this one, as well as MPD shows up on this one. DCPS, to your point, Rep. Patoy, shows up in a lot of different places. So we have some that are DCPS chancellor. We have some that are just straight up DCPS. It's really interesting to see how people group. And then the other thing I would flag is there are different advocacy groups show up in all of the charts, and different advocacy groups show up in different places on the chart. So like we have, I think in most of the, like PAVE shows up here, C4DC shows up, DEC, Empower Ed, technically they're all advocacy groups, but different placements depending, Black Swan, depending on how people experience them. Ed Council shows up here again, ward level Ed Councils, PTAs, PTOs. So we did definitely hear a range of types of offices and saw some trends again around how people experience this. So I'm happy to let people kind of take a look at how we got there, like all of the feedback, because what these are essentially Caitlin's notes about for the power map, why people place things to where they placed. And so like, if you'll notice, so like SBOE, the first map, we noticed SBOE was in different quadrants and so you can see it grouped. So people talk through this iteration of the board feels different than other iterations of the board. It depends on your member. They're saying it's different as far as individuals. The SBOE, they experience largely as engaged, but see us as largely legislative, regulatory. SBOE is present, only so much we can do. Again, you're seeing depends. So this is one of the reasons we group the responses so you can see trends for different offices. I'll stop for a moment. Are there any questions about like the power mapping activity or thoughts?
It's interesting. I guess I'm trying to imagine. So now, what is the next step in terms of, and I know we're not there yet, but I'm just telling you where my brain is right now, is like, how do we take this and sort of apply it to what we're going to do, whatever it is we're going to do, whatever our conversation is. So you don't have to answer that. I'm just sort of putting that up there.
Oh yeah, I mean that's totally a valid thought that we, I guess, will have an answer to.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just, I think it's really helpful and interesting to see how folks think about all of this, and also just who is considered part of the pantheon, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that is something to consider. I guess it would be interesting if we could think of sort of another activity that would build on this one, that would kind of bring, I don't know. Yeah. It's very unformed in my mind right now, but that is kind of where my mind is right now.
And it's also a lot of information. We got a lot of rich feedback. So I'm totally looking forward to time to kind of, people to process and delve in on their own, and us to kind of crystallize some more thoughts. A couple of the other questions, just so I can give a voiceover. How well do you feel the DC's education system incorporates feedback from you? I think this is a particularly important question. Again, they're grouped the same way. Largely, I will say people did not feel like the system was designed to be responsive. I would say the categories fell into a couple different ways, different types of responses. So one is like the idea that you had to kind of create your own power, if you will. So like this idea of whoever's loudest gets the most attention, going outside of school buildings, like that type of engagement, right? Like then there's others who talk about it being kind of reactive information. So like having to, surveys are given, but like what changes the system. I'm trying to see where else. This was largely about like pandemics from us. This is specific to SBOE. So like we did surveys, but largely you see people talk about topic-based engagement as opposed to an ongoing feedback loop. And then just, of course, like a sense of there just not being opportunities for people to weigh in and influence decisions. So like you'll see, like literally someone said it doesn't incorporate our feedback. Someone else said like decisions are already made, not well, right? It's inaccessible. So those were the types of things that largely came up for that question. Next question that we asked when you're looking for information, and this is particularly interesting, where do you go to find it? Like, who do you ask? So you saw a couple of commonalities, like people do see the SBOE as a resource, whether it be their individual member or a website. Something else that was interesting is people said there are many sources of information, but they actually can be in conflict with one another. So that I thought was particularly interesting. Individual agencies, and then they say if they can't get an answer or navigate through their agency, they go to our sister offices, so like the ombudsman. Some people just said they just don't know, like they don't know where to start or who to go to. They don't know who's responsible. And that's different from do I receive a response from a certain person? So like someone said, I don't know who's responsible, but I voted for this SBOE representative and have sent emails and have received answers. No, they're acknowledging, they're not sure that's the right person, but again, they are having some responsiveness. Someone else just noted that you just get online and kind of Google, like they just go to their computer. You see computer here, you see Google here, smattering of websites. So there is a question around just how people access the information and if people even know where to navigate. That might be something we can look into as a board or a point of improvement. One issue or concern, and the framing literally was that has taken way too much time to address because we know people have a variety of issues at any given time. A lot of things came up. So everything from safe passage to definitions of quality, facilities. I'll let you all read the list, but there was a range of things that came up when it came to this. Some people actually acknowledged that they felt this question was particularly cathartic. So if nothing else, we provided some mental health services that day. Some of the things around equity showed up in the different places. Curriculum, again, you're seeing like resources show up. Star rating shows up. Data transparency. Next question that showed up: what is the biggest challenge you face when it comes to the governance decision making? A lot of different answers here. Everything from just not feeling people not having power, feeling like there aren't accountability channels, and then like people thought about like democratic choice, and so things like the public charter school board and their ability to influence who holds positions came up, which I thought was interesting. It's not something I immediately thought of. I acknowledge. And then just people feeling frustrated. And I'm moving quickly because I know we're coming up on the hour. So please like flag me if I need to, if you have a thought or a question. Changes, if you could change one thing about the governance structure, we came up a lot. I'm of course, this is a session we led, but the SBOE came up in every single session as far as the authority of the SBOE. I will acknowledge that in the conversation, there are some assumptions about, or not even assumptions, there is a teetering between kind of like SBOE and school board that people have. And so, but overall, there is a back and forth around, like we came up a lot. The mayor comes up a bunch. In mayoral control was said in a couple different ways. So like you see in mayoral control here, you see significantly reduce the amount of power from the mayor, or independent checks and balances on the mayor. Yeah, a bunch about the mayor. Healthy atmosphere, no mayoral control, head of state control, right? So those were some common threads. Remove mayoral control, in mayoral control came up. How do you define successful governance? This I think can be helpful and informative to us as far as like the moving forward. There were a lot of interesting kind of like words and thoughts that came up here. So everything from like communal and accessible, willingness to reimagine the whole thing. So an acknowledgement that it's not necessarily what we had or what we have, that there is a possibility for something different, broader, greater, listening and responding to the needs of those most vulnerable, rather than the most money being held accountable. Autonomy came up as far as schools. So really good feedback. Things around checks and balances you also see up here.
Less surveys.
Less surveys. People hate surveys. What would you like to add or improve about our governance decision-making structure? Less surveys, more discussion and dialogue. I mean, if you think about the comments that were raised in some of the previous questions, people, and this is my interpretation, but people largely felt that there was almost a default to one-way communication. So like, I'll fill out a survey, I'm not so sure, you surveyed me, I'm not so sure what happens to that information. I'm not so sure that is used to inform decision-making. They want to feel like they are in conversation with a particular decision maker or agency. So that tracks. Student voice came up here. More parent, teacher, and student voice came up in a couple different iterations of this question. And then I will say we had a couple of sessions that were like teacher heavy. So you see a lot of feedback around specifically how teachers are experiencing this system in this session. So it gets very specific about teacher evaluation systems, impact, school leaders, and like the ability to make decisions about schools and how they're staffed. It might actually be interesting as we think about our feedback and surveys, trying to track like where a stakeholder, like how a stakeholder, which is the worst word ever, categorizes themselves, and then like how some of their responses track, which might help us just learn a little bit more about who has knowledge of what systems. I think we could possibly see some trends there. Last question. What would make you feel heard? And so things that I don't think are particularly surprising, but people talked about, active listening, not just one-off. You see the terminology checkbox here, in addition to in other questions. They want the responsiveness. So like you see having concerns actually be addressed, or having a public committee for concerns and issues. We need this idea that there's proof of process. So like certain communities being served well and certain communities not being served well. Having a space to say, this is what you said and here's what we'll do about it. Again, those things in my book kind of go to like responsiveness and people understanding and experiencing that the process works for them. So again, like a lot of good and rich feedback. Darren noted that he did share this with the committee members. We'll make sure to send it to the full board so they can see like the raw data. I'll stop talking to see if there are any immediate thoughts or reactions. But I'd be curious as people are able to dig into it a little bit more. I feel like it's one of those conversations that you'll walk away and then you'll read the thing and then you'll say, oh, and this. So we do know it's ongoing. The committee will continue. And so I really am looking forward to how you all see this as a value add to our process. So I will stop. Well, I'll keep it up in case anybody wanted me to go back to anything in particular. But I will stop.
I have some thoughts, but Jacques and Ruth, you haven't. I feel like I've been talking a lot. So do you guys want to jump in?
Oh, and Ruth, to answer your question, typically our meeting is about an hour and a half, but I did not want to be talking through the hour and a half. I wanted to make sure we had time to kind of be in conversation about it. So we have, I believe.
Oh, we have a half hour. Okay, cool.
Thanks.
I don't have any questions, and I am going to have to jump off at 1 o'clock. I mean, 2 o'clock. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Well, my thought actually is, if I were sort of doing research, and this was my data, my next step would be to try to, code it. Like, how do we make sense of this? And I would try to pull out the themes and the patterns, and then we could present it, or a companion to this raw data would be. So what we saw here are the trends we saw was, there were a lot of, or a majority of folks, here are the like 5 bullet points, right, of like responses to this question that really stood out, or there might just be one, there might not be any trends. I don't know, but those are the kinds of things that would be, I think, helpful to then thinking about what, first of all, are there questions we didn't ask that we should be asking because we didn't, learn about something we need to learn about? And also, is there, this is a small sample of folks who know enough about the SBOE to come to our info session, right? So it's a really specific group of folks. And do we want to then take those, the bullet points that we pull out and sort of build on those when we go wider and, try to get a wider swath or more diverse swath or whatever. So that's sort of where I'm thinking. Maybe the next steps would be for this, and maybe staff could help with that, like chunking of the data.
I mean, the one thing I'll say, oh, hold on, I can go on video now, is, I'm interested in using this to start putting together some proposals. I just think we're going to get pretty vague responses until we have more specific proposals, and we have information here that that suggests what people don't like, and it suggests what they want. And I think we need to do our job of putting together proposals.
So, well, I know Jock said he was jumping at 2, and I know he said he didn't have any questions. So we'll let him leave us. I think for me, a couple of things are true. One is we do have it built into our work plan to present proposals and have people respond back to those. One thing I realized that we did not do as a committee, both to kind of, and this is in, I think, response to 2 thoughts, one from Rep. Kasoy and one from Wattenberg, is this is not a huge sample size. I do think it's rich information. I don't, and like when we did not set a metric or a saying that like when is it enough feedback to move to the next stage. So like in an ideal world, how many people do we want to touch and get feed, like have information from before we feel confident that we have a universe that is large enough, that is, representative enough. And so I think that's a question we should ask ourselves. And I think there are ways, because as a committee, this was our first engagement. We have not had any other public engagement. So I would say my gut tells me that we should be thinking about more opportunities. We can start to do some coding to kind of not reinforce, but to make our like to ask better questions. I think we ask good questions, but like to ask better questions. But I would like to see us think through as a committee what are further opportunities for engagement and like how much engagement is enough. Because if we say, all right, we would like to see this amount of people from 7, this amount of people from 8, this amount of families, this amount of teachers, then that helps us know where we're working towards, instead of feeling like, okay, we don't have enough, or instead of feeling like, well, we didn't get the response we wanted, but not being able to articulate what we did want. And so I don't know if that's something we have to decide today. I think we can kind of talk offline and like hash that out. But I realized that we did not set a goal for like what is enough and get, like how many people are we trying to reach? And I recall at one of our public meetings, we did a committee report out and someone asked if we had considered surveys or other ways to engage. I mean, I would feel actually fairly confident that someone who's a non-SBOE member could do this presentation and send us feedback. So like we could, there are other opportunities that we could take advantage of in virtual spaces and in a relatively short time if we leaned on others to get more good engagement. But I think that's something we should talk about. And again, I think having a goal of like what is good engagement would be helpful, because we didn't discuss that. So those are my thoughts.
I think that makes sense. And I think that actually having pulling out the themes and patterns and then doing more engagement in a similar manner, maybe refining some questions, adding questions, whatever, but kind of doing something similar, then we can see if it aligns, would our set of main points change? Would they grow? Would they, so I think it would be helpful to have sort of a starting point of this is what we're hearing, but this is a really small and particular pool. And then to go wider and see what happens from there. But to have something that we're actually adding to gives this much more form for me in thinking about it.
And I'd say if I had to guess, and this guess could be all the way wrong, but as the person who was at all of these sessions, this can't be more than, I feel like 50 people sounds generous. This might be 50 people. And they're all, again, 50 people who we reached through our normal board channels. It's a completely English speaking audience. We were in different parts of the city, but I don't know what the number is, but yeah, I want it to be more than 50. And again, I do think, and this is to Caitlin's credit, honestly, the way she designed this presentation, it doesn't have to be, now granted, I appreciate my remarks about being an awesome facilitator, but I think a lot of that also just gives credit to the design of the thing. And I think that any of us, in addition to any of the board members, or just like if it was an education council chair or somebody else could do this type of presentation and help us, move ourselves forward.
Do you think it could be done in less time and still reap sort of a similarly rich feedback? Like, do you think it could be done in 30 minutes?
I don't know. I don't know. I could think about that. I think that's the question. I think it depends on the size of the group.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true.
And it might also behoove us to think about, like, do we, and that granted, we heard that people don't like the surveys, but are there other types of interactions that aren't this qualitative that might be helpful to have to do some of the coding? Like, we do a poll or something like that too.
Well, I think if we have those, bullet points pulled out, that would make that more possible, right? We have like our 4 questions or our 4 points, and just is this true, for you? And so that's another way. And I do think I can imagine doing this in the various groups that I meet with in my ward, and doing like right now they're all virtual, so just doing like a poll at the end with 5 questions or something. I do think that would probably elicit more response. So,
I mean, one thing we could do is just ask each member to, bring it to their ward council or their PAVE group or both, between now and a few months from now.
that's also why I'm asking if it can be shorter, because I don't
agree, 'cause
imagine
like
they'd
30 minutes.
be able to take an hour of that.
Agree.
Maybe 30, but not an hour. So unless I did my own, we could do our own town hall or something, but that again, it brings a really different crowd. So I think it's something we should think about, how, if it were to be tailored to, groups where you have to be quick, like what would be acceptable to cut out, I guess.
I think all of that's true. I think the other thing I would want to think about, or at least could clarify, is what does, like, who are we trying to reach? So like if we have a sense that I don't know, families whose first language is not English is a particular population, then like maybe it is worth hosting some specific sessions for those families. Or if we know that families in 7 and 8, we have a target for response, like maybe it's worth doing a specific session for that, or like, like what are the not just saying how many responses, but holding ourselves accountable for, in our mind, what is an equitable response up front, I think could help us craft outreach in a way that gets us a more diverse and representative voice, and also will help guide us as far as when we look for maybe partners in the work to think about where we present, and maybe go beyond some of the people that we most naturally partner with. And so I think in my head, those are some of the next steps, and kind of just building on our work plan around that, so that we can have a firm, almost like an engagement plan that complements our work plan, so we can get to that point where we can feel comfortable making recommendations and be able to articulate to people when we plan to move forward. I think it'll help us map out too, just like how long things take in reality.
Can we look at the work plan? Would that be helpful right now?
We
Like,
could. I don't know if I have it.
I could pull it up.
in front of me, but I'm sure Darren does.
Thank
Oh,
you, Darren. I'm just wondering, so was the plan to do the engagement to inform the proposal and then to do more engagement around the proposal? Is that the basic plan? And then to use that post proposal engagement to refine it, and then do we have a plan after that, or is that sort of to be, I mean, I think it would be totally legitimate to not.
So our plan has two stages, and Darren is going to pull up. I will say we did.
Would you mind making me co-host? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, of course. Now the question is, does Ebony Rose know how to do that? Oh, somebody did it. John Paul did it.
Oh, I was impressed, Ebony Rose. I was like, yes, you do.
I could have not told on me at all. Yeah, so our plan kind of falls into two phases. So one, well, no, actually, I think it's three phases. So one was like the scholarly doing the homework, which was like some of the expert interviews and that type of stuff, and the what the grad students helped us do. Yep, there we go. A couple different phases. So this was the first phase of the plan. Expert interviews. Somebody's moving something around. First set of community meetings.
We have one thing completed. Okay.
Well, I don't know if we've updated this again.
No, I'm looking now. Thank you for making it bigger.
Okay.
Focus group. We did.
Oh,
We did
I
do
needed
that,
to fit to
right?
the window. Yeah, there's some things on here that we probably could
Mhm.
mark.
Community meetings. Well, I guess we're maybe gonna do more. Okay, it's okay.
Yeah. So there's an assumption here that a couple things happen in phase one. The first thing we do in phase one was like the lit review we did with the students, the expert interviews to give us a sense of what types of things we needed to explore, point ourselves in the right direction, and then start to do engagement. So like community meetings, I think that again, that goes to the question of like how much engagement is enough. These things, community meetings and focus groups are going to be marked pause and in progress until we make a decision about what's enough.
Mhm.
Because we didn't make that decision. There is an assumption that we then, once we decide, there is a synthesis of what we found, and then we will present a set of draft recommendations. So like, here's where we think we're going on this. We will then share that with the board and get some full board feedback, but then we'll do some follow-up to do some engagement sessions again, saying like, hey, please respond to what we think we heard you say. I don't have another way to explain it other than when you're having a conversation with someone, it typically is helpful if when they say something to you, if you say back to them like, all right, are we on the same page? Like, I think I heard you this way, which then allows people to correct us, add things, but also to address this feeling of people not knowing where their feedback goes. And them being able to be part of the process. And then once we get that feedback, we would provide a set of final recommendations. And those final recommendations would then be presented at a working session, adopted. We would probably have some type of report or do some briefings. That's the third phase, which is the rollout. The fourth phase is essentially just comms and advocacy. So as we decide what our recommendations are, we then would transition to saying like, hey, here's what we need to do, leaning on decision makers, identifying some paths to get it adopted, making sure the public is aware of what came out of all of this, hopefully really good work. So that is our work plan.
I have one comment on that, which is, I'm just looking and it says research lit review is complete. And I gotta say, I feel like there's a bunch of stuff we don't know. And I want to use one example. Christina Henderson just spoke at our Ward 3 meeting last week, and we talked a bit about governance. And one of the sort of points she made, and this is not new to us, but I think it's well said, is just that DC has the most extreme mayoral control system in the country. And we need to look at that. I mean, we talked about, and I know the fellow or the intern earlier on did a little bit of this, but I think we really need a very explicit list of how governance in different mayoral control districts differs. And I don't think we ever really got that. You know, we got a few items from a few cities is my recollection. And I think part of what we need to go forward on this is to make that really clear and sort of have a very explicit research project on that. And that, I mean, there may be some other questions too, but for me, that's just a really important one. What happens in other mayoral control cities, districts versus here?
Is it, Ruth, just to clarify, so is that mainly for the committee's understanding of where we are and what's possible, sort of based on what is happening in other?
Well, I think
Or is
when we
it-
start
yeah,
to
go
look
on.
at proposals, it will be something to draw from.
Yeah,
So I think that I want to provide what I think is helpful context. I totally think that it's almost implied that as we identify things, there will be more information pulled in. But as far as our action item, it is the work, and I will tell you what is included in our lit review. I'm also happy to recirculate the kind of PowerPoint I put together with like our work to date. But it is both the information that the students pull for us and the previous information that our staff built, which does spend a little more time on just different jurisdictions. So if there are other specific things that we should look at, I would assume I think I have a couple assumptions. One assumption being that we will go through a similar process as a board since it's the beginning of the year, and reflecting on what our work is for the year, where we need support from staff, and where there might be opportunities for us to contract out or other things. So I think it is a good time to look at what information we've gathered so far, both from the students and from our staff, and then where are there value adds that we might want to request. So that's an assumption I have kind of built into this. I do want the requests we make to largely be guided by a lot of the feedback we get. Like I want us to have both really firmly held, like almost like values for this process. I do want us to be honestly, a little more loose in our ability to kind of pivot and shift as we hear and learn different things. And so I don't necessarily feel that all of the research questions we had when we started are perfect and the right ones. And so those are kind of my assumptions, but I think we can be generous, and maybe it's not even generous, but I feel confident in saying like, yes, we did a research and lit review for the committee because the students did do that and the staff did do that. Is there more we can learn? Are there more questions to ask? Absolutely, yes.
It would be I agree. It would be helpful maybe to send back out to people those two documents, and we can just revisit what we know and what we still want to know.
yeah, I
Yep.
agree. Just ahead of the retreat so we can,
Oh, good idea before the retreat. Yeah.
yeah, which is February 4th. So wait, we were originally going to get all of this done by the end of this year. Was that true? Is this like a revised work plan? Or was it just phase one we were going to get done? When we said that this committee was going to sunset, were we supposed to like have a report done by December?
That's what was suggested. I think I was pretty, again, firm in my values for what we wanted to accomplish, but loose in how we accomplished it. I think I flagged for people, and maybe not everybody believed me, But there was a recommendation that we needed to have a report by the legislative session or something in September. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if that's feasible. I think we have that as a benchmark to engage. But
Yeah.
I absolutely see this as an ongoing conversation. That's
Okay.
still my posture. I do think that it again is a great time to look at our work overall for the board and just like what are the capacity lifts needed from members and from staff to get us to the finish line on this, because we've learned a lot. And I think we've now had some experience as members as far as a committee structure and like what it means to be on multiple committees and have multiple work streams. And so I feel fairly confident that we can come up with something that is even more realistic.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm excited just about all of those prospects. In general, for the board, we're not new anymore.
Not new anymore. So we know some things. But yeah, so I hope that helps orient people and just like how the committee proposed the phases of the learning, and then the why behind some of the decisions. We're
Yep.
getting pretty close to 2:30, and I want to make sure if there are other, because I think we have some good action items as far as follow up, but I want to make sure if there are other thoughts or questions, we get to them, and then be mindful of time, because I definitely appreciate everyone's time, and definitely appreciate Representative Patterson for doing whatever he had to do to free himself up. I know the feeling.
I think I'm good. I feel like we're
Good,
in a good place
good.
for moving forward.
Mhm.
Good.
I think progress has been made. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm thrilled to be able to offer roughly 6 minutes of found time. I want to just thank our staff again, because we would not have gotten to this point without them. John Paul makes sure that we do what we're supposed to do. It holds me in particular accountable, which I love. And Darren made sure that we had all the information for this meeting, and we absolutely would not have this quality of feedback without Caitlin. And so coming off of this conversation about, what do we need to do to move forward, just recognizing like the capacity that they give us to be great is probably a great starting point. So thank you all for your time. Looking forward to feedback as you all dig into the different things. And I'm thrilled, just that we're getting more engagement around this. So I believe we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.